Utham, I'm a Keralite. I didn't grow up in Kerala, but I spent my summer vacations in Kerala. And I remember this very, I think, magical concept. In Malayalam, it used to be called Lelam, right? Which is an auction, right? I stayed in the small village in the backwater, near the backwaters. And every now and then, my dad, mom, grandparents, etc., would say, for great fish, we need to wake up really early in the morning and go to this nearby jetty for the auction. And I was a kid and I was like, what is this magical place where, and it happens early in the morning. So it's like, before there's even light, right? And you can't go as a kid. And it was like this magical place where you get the best fish, which you normally never get. There's obviously a link to auctions and Captain Fresh. Has that changed? I'm talking about, I don't know, like 30 years, 40 years back. You've studied auctions, especially fish auctions. Are the auctions of 2025 fundamentally different from the auctions of, 1985?
I think the short answer is no.
Wow.
Short answer is no. And we have a long way to go through in terms of why it's not changed and what are the levers there and how is it panning out between a Kerala to a Kolkata to, obviously we can zoom out into Mediterranean to Billingsgate and Grimsby and go to San Diego, San Francisco, talk about all of these coasts and fishing villages and how they've evolved. But short answer to your question is no, it's not changed as much.
A question that I wanted to ask earlier when we were talking about when you started Captain Fresh, and is you're a single co-founder. At no point did you try and look for a co-founder? What gave you the confidence to be a single co-founder?
Actually, I was not bothered with this question a lot. Initially, when I started tapping into VCs, is when I started learning that this could be a limitation. Initially, when I started, it kind of came naturally to me that yes, one captain of the board. More so, why? Because I came from a very traditional environment. I saw one Cyrus Mistry, I saw one Ratan Tata, I saw one Birla, I saw one Venkat Nekanti. Like everywhere, I saw one captain of the boat. This whole concept of shared accountability, I want a partner to run the business, it didn't occur to me, honestly. Only when I started tapping into VCs, then these concepts of, okay, what if you get burnt out? All of those questions started coming in. So, to your point, by design, I thought this is how businesses are built, right? Maybe the startup ecosystem is different in the sense that, yes, there is this whole stress on bringing partners along so that you can share the stress to begin with. So the way
Who do you share your stress with?
Actually, no, that's a downside of being a solo founder. I don't or I can't share my stress, so it is my own battle. But I think as a person, I am like that. I like to just unplug, just process, reflect, come back, and take my risks, whatever that is, take my decisions. I like that mode. The way I have worked is actually I'm not a great operator CEO. I am more of an investor CEO. Every vision or everything that I think of is naturally weaving around who can do this for me. Who is not an afterthought. Actually, who is like very much plugged into my choices that I make. So to give you example, when I raised my, so to say, pre-seed, the first thing that I did is went and bought a company. which had 40 people, which had a founder who became my founding member.
What was that company?
It was one of the companies that I had invested in back in as a.
Was it a meat or a seafood
It was a
company?
meat and seafood D2C player in Hyderabad. So we obviously rehashed that business to a B2B because I didn't believe in B2C, and that was the whole uh, alignment that I had with the founder. So I had.
Interesting. Now this is very interesting because this is the P playbook in some senses, that like you can bring together people and companies and like assemble them, but
Yeah.
you have to do them well.
I think that's all I've done, honestly. Every city that I wanted to go after, I, I of course we have hired individual people, but if you look at Captain Fresh, we have hired in teams a lot. I have plucked teams from various parts, and if we have grown so fast, so soon, one of the reason is even in these acquisitions, the thing that I look for is a team because we don't give exit to anybody. We, in fact, sell our vision and get them to reinvest their wealth into Captain Fresh. That's the feature in every acquisition. If they don't do it, we don't even entertain in terms of a deal conversation.
So, two questions there. Firstly, what kind of teams then are you looking for when you're essentially, let's assume that this is a team or an organization that's been running for a while, and you go to them and say, we'll buy you out, and you work. I'm assuming you say you continue to do what you're doing and more ambitious play, etc. What are you looking for and what are they signing up for? What is the reason that brings them on board and keeps them with you?
See, most of these leaders that we bring on table, I'll also give you a sense of the profile of these leaders so that you appreciate what I'm talking about. They are underachievers. For the kind of legacy that, or rather, find the kind of background they have, the legacy that they are likely to leave is underwhelming. So, first acquisition that we did, the two CEOs, one CEO is vice chair or chair at NFI. NFI is like the NASCOM. The other CEO is a vice chair at Global Shrimp Council. Uh, the Polish CEO that we got, that gentleman had done 8 acquisitions, listed his company in Polish stock exchange, delisted it, got a private equity, gave them an exit, and now has $100 million family office. And he's our salmon global CEO. Now we are looking at a tuna play where he has a very similar celebrity status when it comes to tuna. So, in some manner, all of these folks have reached this 200, 300, 400 million-ish mark. But if they are given some kind of a platform that we have, they can see a path to a billion. And that is what we are unlocking. Like I said, for the kind of background and leadership that these folks bring to the table, they themselves believe this is not the end point. And it is for us to recognize and see those endpoints and align what that path could be. Like, for example, the US team, when we started acquisition conversation, we had a very detailed plan on how we can take that business to $1 billion. Similarly, when this salmon business or leadership we were discussing, it was about how do we play this salmon in a different way where we do a salmon 2.0 and he is the champion of that playbook. So that is what motivates them to be part of it. I think the things that give them confidence is that we are a well governed, VC owned, financial institutions owned business, which is unique in the seafood industry. In fact, we are possibly the only one. There were two, three others which came out, but for some reasons they're not still around. So, which meant this company is having an exit, definitely going to go public, hopefully, will be well run. And those are some of the things that gave them confidence to be part of this vision and this journey.
So, to go back to something that you said earlier when we were discussing the inception of Captain Fresh, and which is really look, there is such a large market globally and it's inefficient globally. You're in some senses finding other people who believe in that same, because you're talking about legacy right now, and these are
Absolutely.
people who've accomplished a lot, maybe spent decades in this sector. But you're essentially arguing that even these people know that something is possible,
For
and
sure,
that's
right?
really
Six
what they,
hundred
yeah.
billion dollar industry. 6 billion is the largest company. Any other industry, any other category, like poultry is 450. The largest player is 50 billion, which is Tyson. Then you have JBS, which is at 80 billion. You can see it like Nestle, just the dairy business is 25 billion. Danone, just the dairy business is 20 billion. You can see those numbers, right? And these are folks who've been in this and seen other industries, other categories really evolve. And somehow I felt that frustration and that fact that no, hands are tied. And somewhere this industry has never figured out the whole act of raising equity. And in some sense, I'm lucky to be part of the Indian ecosystem. Thanks to some of the hard work done by the likes of Licious and Fresh Form, meat and seafood for some reason was acceptable to the VC community. This has not been the case globally. There is no other ecosystem globally which has managed to attract such high quality VCs to a sector like this, which is so traditional. Even a London ecosystem could not attract. Even a San Francisco ecosystem could not attract. I don't know if there was supply to begin with and founders to begin with, but the fact of the matter is, if you take VC investment by different cities in our category, India is by and large like the 60-70% market share globally from this kind of risk capital.
Oh, of when you say 60-70% market share, it's like
VC
VCs and Ps investing in meat and seafood
VCs
as a.
investing in meat and seafood, not Ps. VCs investing, the high risk,
Hmm.
who had the appetite
Hmm.
to
Early stage risk.
early
Hmm.
stage risk to see through a $50 million burn like this and
Hmm.
still wait for us to figure out the business model, right? That I think, for an industry of this size, you need that kind of appetite to discover what we have discovered.
Now, like, I want to switch to a bunch of different questions. I think it's been fascinating discussing Captain Fresh and the seafood space. Honestly, I learned so much today. Tell me something about yourself. How old are you?
I am 38.
You're married. You have
I'm
a.
married. I have a 8-year-old son.
I also know that you're all over the place. You're
Yeah.
traveling all the time. Where do you stay? Where does
I
the
live
family
in
stay?
Amsterdam. My family lives in Amsterdam. So essentially, last 3 years, I have traveled 1.8 million kilometers. I just did some numbers, so I'm able to share this with you. And this 1.8 million apparently puts me in like 0.0002% of the world. And an average Fortune 500 CEO travels 40% of what I've traveled. So yeah, I think almost 35% of my uptime I've spent inside a flight in the last 3 years.
If you were to take all your flight time and divide it into a pie chart of the purpose for those flights, what are the top two or three biggest
So if you
elements in
see
that
the
pie chart?
last 2 years, while the popular narrative is that Captain Fish has bought companies, but reality is I have sold Captain Fish because we have basically done equity swap, and each of these selling has
By
taken
that, you mean that when you're buying a company, you're taking their equity and giving them
Captain Fresh
Captain Fresh
stock.
equity, and
So
obviously with the promise that this will be worth much more today and in the future.
absolutely. So imagine that I'm taking a company which has generated profits for the last 30 years and I'm selling a
Yeah, which is
vision
quite
of,
commendable
yeah,
because, and especially people like you're saying, I mean, these are people who spend 2, 3, 4 decades. One would argue that they're at the stage in life where they're like, I want to sell off my business and go retire and go fish in the sea or something.
absolutely. So an average time that I take to close a deal is anywhere between 15 to 18 months. And the
Hmm.
number of times I make a trip to each of these could be on at least on a monthly basis, 2 trips or 1 trip at least. And if you're doing deals across 3 or 4 countries, that's the travel. So
Okay,
if
I
I
get
have
it.
to really
Now the other
split it,
other analogy that comes to my mind is Apple's product development timelines. Because usually when a new self iPhone is released, you typically know that Apple is working on at least the 2 or 3 next models. So with your 15 to 18 month cycles, which means that right now in 2026, you're essentially trying to figure out potentially 2027 or
28,
2028 acquisitions.
28
Very interesting.
business development. So if you have done 8 acquisitions, you can do the math in terms of how much we have
So your
traveled.
number one pie chart element is selling Captain Fresh and closing deals,
No, I think to begin with, to build a conviction
which
in
is all those
terms of
40 cities in the US, 40
that
cities
is
in.
one. But let's say I now wanted to buy a business in seafood in Spain. Then I went and visited 10 cities in Spain, trying to build my own conviction on when this product comes into my platform, what are those synergies that can be unlocked. Then went to their suppliers in Mexico, did this entire travel from Mazatlan all the way up to San Diego, really learning how this ecosystem works. Are there ways we can, whatever we have built as a fishgram tool, is that something that I can plug into this ecosystem? Really seeing this supply chain with my own eyes before having my own thesis that yes, this is a great addition to my company. Now, this out of those 18 months could be 3 to 4 month effort. After that, 4 to 5 months is me being able to convince to the stakeholders there that I am speaking sense. They can believe in this. And then obviously the execution of this deal, right? So there is this whole, like I said, the large part of this travel honestly is also about building my own conviction, really seeing through my own eyes, saying that
Help me understand that process. When you're visiting all these cities, meeting all these people, what are you doing? Are you taking notes? Are you How are you reflecting? Is everything in your head? Are you reviewing them, revising them later? I know you earlier told me you're taking photos, etc. But
no, I think I used to take notes. Now, what I've realized is if I'm doing a 1 hour meeting, I want to just take 2 words or 3 words about it, not more than that. I'm extremely, constrained or want to constrain myself in terms of what I
so
take
if
away.
it's 1 hour, then you want to be intensely focused in what happens in that 1 hour.
1 hour and then just take those 2 3 words, and that too I type it after the meeting, like what is that top two things that he said or that I can learn. There are so many meetings where I wouldn't have learned anything, but at least I would have interacted. So for me it is about, a lot of times I walk in with a thesis saying that okay, for example, there is a market called Mercabana which is very similar to Russell market in Bangalore in terms of how the
This
fish.
is West Spain.
Yes, in Barcelona, obviously the organized version of Mercabana. Now there's a thesis that okay, this market, the buy and sell transaction that's happening is happening in a certain manner where the customer walks in, the guy comes in, he gives his chit what he wants, and then he goes, he picks up, and then observing the fact that okay, the fish he would have asked for 3 kg, but he can't find a 3 kg fish. He will put it as 3.2. But this 3.2 is a decision that this guy makes. Now, is owner really watching for that? So these are all the points of leakage that I have seen. Now, this is where a digital intervention can really change the business, right? Which is what we have tried to do in India, but we couldn't because the gross margins were very thin. So these are kind of some of the scenarios, details that I'm looking at in each of these ecosystem to say that okay, the tools that we have built, are they useful? Now, once I find them useful, then it is to prove to these stakeholders and then take them along in that journey and show them, look, notice these 3 4 points, and this is where a technology can, and when they start learning, oh wow, technology can actually help this business and there is use case, and in a lot of cases we bring them to India and then we show them what is happening in India in the small parts where it's functional, and then they get convinced. So there is a process to this thing.
Got it. Very
First,
interesting. I realized we didn't go too much into depth into what the tech part of Captain Fresh is. What exactly is the tech that you've built, and where and how does it run?
so we have tried to build tech tools for three sets of stakeholders to begin with. And then subsequently we acquired one which we changed that to a SaaS platform. So three sets of stakeholders is, one is fishermen. So fishermen, the biggest question is how do I go, where do I go into fishing? So which is where we took a lot of these remote sensing data, we plugged into Inkoi satellites, we got all of these high frequency data in terms of weather, temperature of water, wind direction, etc. And we try to model what we call as the potential fishing zone. Which idea is that when the fishermen use this, they get some idea of where to use. We are not the first ones to do it, honestly. There have been some NGOs which do this. What we have attempted to do is try and bring the
I remember this very famous experiment where you could send an SMS and then you'd get back some kind of
These are
data, etc.
actually,
in
see,
Kerala,
what
etc.
happens is SMS maybe for day boats, but as you go deeper, you don't have
Mm,
network.
got it.
So that is actually the two biggest problem to be solved is one is data, but more importantly, how do you operate on a local storage? And most of these guys wouldn't want to take expensive phones because the weather there is they'll be
Mm,
holding in inside
right.
a cover and all that. So how do you operate across these environments? That's where we took a lot of time and
Mm.
effort and iterations.
So this is a mobile app, I'm
This is a
assuming.
mobile app. It's called Fishgram Marine. Idea is to help the fishermen in terms of fishing better, and that's a hook for us. So now what we are trying to manifest this into is, if you see the Indian fishing industry, it's not, it's data starved. Because it's data starved, the European market cannot access this fish, because if they don't get data, the classification, it could be part of IUU. It is illegal and
Mm-hmm.
unsustainable fishing zones. So because data is not there, our fishes are not marketable in certain markets. So we are trying to plug that gap in terms of how this tool can help in terms of getting that data. So we started and tried this as an exporter. We failed because it was a hard sell. Now we are trying to do it from the other side, where we have now bought the brands in Europe.
So you're on the other side as
Now
well
we are
now.
on the other side. Now we are putting that team to work with our teams and see how we can unlock this supply. So that's the iteration that we're doing. The second tool that we have built is for farmers, which is again the problem statement that I described. How can we give farmers a rough idea of the biomass underwater? So today the farmers generate these weekly lab reports, which give them some sense of health metrics, but those lab reports are all lying in some various WhatsApp groups. Now we are trying to get those lab reports into one platform and obviously use some analytics. Like I said, it's not rocket science. It's just that we are bringing tech to a part of the economy, part of our stakeholder set.
Reliable tech that works
That,
well enough.
yeah, that works well enough. And there we are trying to do some work around the interface, where I'm trying to make it very user friendly, where you just take the picture of the animal which is in the water, just pick a sample and then
Yeah.
you take a picture. We're able to project what is its average growth rate, because we have the historical pictures as well.
Hmm.
And that gives some sense of the health, and then some sense of what is the mortality rate and the biomass. The third piece of tech that we have built is for factories, which goes by the name FAS, which is Factory as a Service, which is basically an ERP. But the difference is that, like I said, I tried to get SAP and TCS into this, and I realized that they're not flexible enough. So we have built a very, very agile front end. We call it as a no-code platform. It can go in and configure quickly in any of these workflows, and has a very standardized backend, and it has multi-language support, so that we are in Indonesia, Philippines, now we are in Denmark, etc. So that is the third platform. The fourth platform is, we bought this retail chain called ChopServe very, very early in our journey. We brought the brand, and that we have transformed into a SaaS platform, wherein we have built a POS to take care of the meat and seafood retail chain. So we also manage the retail chain. If you go to a Nature's Basket here, or a Spar, or multiple brands, we manage around 70 stores in India, around 25 stores in Dubai. So the seafood counters within the modern trade is managed by us, and we manage that through our own proprietary software. So that was the second step. Like we got a company which ran 6 stores. We expanded that to 100 stores using this SIS model, and now we have decoupled the software part and only taking the software. So we've just launched that software in Angola and Africa. That's our GTM for Africa, where we are partnering with the leading chains and providing only software as a service to run their seafood counters, which drives the pricing, inventory, wastage, meat balancing, all of the critical problems that drive your P&Ls in these retail chains. So these are our 4 products.
Wastage is a pretty big
It's a
problem
huge
in this
problem
area.
statement for especially the retailers. Even the large retailer like Carrefour wants us to manage their
What is typically wastage levels like
7
from across?
8%
That's at the modern
at the
retailer
modern
level.
trade retail.
But if you go lower down the chain or to
Lower down the chain
unorganized,
also, actually it's the same. Why I say that is because modern trade has a certain policy saying that beyond 2 days I will sell, and they
right?
do that
Very strictly.
very strictly as a policy, right? Whether the fish is spoiled, not spoiled, etc. Whereas these guys, obviously, it's entrepreneurial driven setup. So by and large, I would say actually modern trade has higher spoilage. Only at that point, at that part of the retail chain, modern trade would have higher spoilage rate compared to a mom and pop store.
Good. Let me switch back to a bunch of questions about you. What is it that motivates you?
Initially, I thought money, but I think over a period of time, I learned that
Sorry, I can't just let that slide, right? Because you took successive pay cuts as you were going down the chain. So
But
why
see,
would you?
there is an interesting thing, right? I took a P&L cut, but I always wanted a balance sheet boost.
Got it.
That's
So you were willing to give up a short term.
yeah, exactly.
Got it.
That's the shift that has happened. So as even today, 20
Sorry, that's a very interesting statement. I'll ask you to explain that. PNL cut in order to get a balance sheet boost. Can you explain that?
so even today, I think the highest amount of tax that I paid was in the year 2015, right? So last 10 years, all I've done is I've kept my expenses low, and all the value that I've created, I have sought people to give me in equity in some form and shape. It could have been selling my own equity in Captain Fresh and then going all in. Like today, I am doing a promoter financing where I am taking loan and pumping into Captain Fresh, which is also in some form and shape the same, where I'm delaying my own gratification, right?
Hmm.
My belief was that let me have my best 10-15 years where I really delay my gratification. What can that create? I think this is the outcome that I've created, where the last 10 years I have not chased money. I don't even own a car.
Hmm.
I have not chased any material stuff. And I have kept that.
You stay in Amsterdam, assuming public transport is good
Yeah,
enough
yeah.
to get
No,
by.
I'm saying even in Bangalore when
Hmm.
I didn't own a car.
Hmm.
I never owned a car. So that's what something that I've delayed, and that's helped me in keeping the expenses light, and that's also helped me in taking more and more risks,
Hmm.
which is played out in terms of return on equity, which is the exposure that I've sought, right? That's what I meant. I cut my.
Got it. So to go back to the motivation question, you said initially you thought it was money, but what is
But
it now?
I think over a period of time, especially last 2-3 years, as I reflected on my journey, especially and what I have hit upon, right? Of course, now on that big picture, it all made sense. But the gravity of the opportunity that I'm sitting on is something that I've realized in the last 2-3 years. And as I think more around,
It's like a reverse of the imposter syndrome, right? Imposter syndrome is you think that you can't do it and then you realize I can do it. And this is like you're at a stage where suddenly the gravity of what you've
it's a
potentially unlocked
there
stares
is
you in the
imposter
face.
syndrome and then there is privilege, and
Hmm.
now there is gratitude, right?
Hmm.
Now I think I'm that point where I'm truly feeling gratitude that yes, it's actually luck
Hmm.
that I landed here. It could have been anywhere else, right? So now that I have landed here, how do I really increase the shelf life of what I can do and how long I can do this? And I think one thing that I've realized along this is money cannot be that driver. If you really want to think in terms of decades and wanting to be here, you need to figure out something that excites you beyond money, because in some form and shape, money is a zero sum game. You want to explore, infinite thing. Money is not an infinite thing, because there's only so much that money can buy, and it just runs out so quickly
Hmm.
that then you run out of motivation, right?
So what is the infinite game that you're chasing now?
I think for me today it's about legacy. If we can build a first packaged food business from India as an Indian company, if somebody can walk into some store in the US and see a product which is a very intimate product as far as the global customer and can connect it back to India, I think it gives me a sense of accomplishment beyond, I think, what all maybe driving a Urus and stuff can give. I think beyond that, this I think is a powerful accomplishment to me. And also, I believe that if I step back, zoom out, and see just the India where it is, entrepreneurs, etc., I think India is very under indexed in terms of global market play, simply because we are very content with the critical mass or perceived critical mass that we have in India. And we don't think outside of India, not just from entrepreneurs, even from a ecosystem cheerleaders or supporters, right? There is a general lack of confidence that Indian founders cannot go out and do something. I'm not contesting about the the digital space, because that's a very easy space, and I think we already have a right to win there. I'm more so talking about the traditional touch and feel categories.
What do you believe in that space? We have to ask you, why do you think that Indian founders are actually well suited to create global businesses in non digital spaces? What is it about India as a country and as a market that you believe gives Indian founders an advantage?
See, I think at the core of it, Rohin, entrepreneurship is about dealing with ambiguity. More and more I stay in these developed parts of the world and learn, I feel the appetite for ambiguity is uh, in those worlds, in the generations that I come across, appetite is declining at a very sharp rate. I'm not talking about any hard things,
No, I
just
get it. I
this
just,
thing,
yeah.
just
Yeah.
this aspect of Indian founders being talented, being savvy to be able to interface with different cultures, and having the appetite for ambiguity, having the art of driving clarity. This itself is a superpower. I think if you look at the world, in fact, I believe in the next 20, 30 years, the share of Asian enterprises in the global GDP will definitely go up. And even in that, India, because of its English speaking and the soft skills advantage that India has, I think India, if it can play its cards right, can definitely play an outsized role in this capture of global GDP.
To take you up on that question of if India can play its cards right, are there some suggestions that you have that would enable or accelerate such moves by Indian founders or companies to create global successful playbooks?
Like I said, I think there is a general thought that India is sufficient to create large outcomes. I think that's something that we all need to really step back and question. Like, for example, if you're having a startup in Stockholm, Sweden, by default, you're thinking global because you're starting out in Sweden,
Because the market is not going to be that
exactly.
huge, I'm guessing.
That advantage that is actually becoming a disadvantage. Like in our own case, we got led into that disadvantage, and we discovered that okay, only 3, 4 micro markets that make sense. But the popular thesis is that India is large. And I can see it in several categories today, where categories run out of Indian market because we are basically talking about India 1,
Hmm.
which is
The 50
just
to 60 million.
exactly, which is just 50 to 60 million. Now, if you were to design the same value proposition elsewhere in an Amsterdam or Berlin, you would by default would have thought of cross border. That thinking is not becoming default in these markets. While you are striving for a value proposition which could be meaningful even for global market, but there is a mental block to keep limiting ourselves to the 5 or 6 cities here and then maybe 20 cities and then going after the same. Not even a South Asia, not even a Southeast Asia. So I think that is where
Got it.
I
To,
believe there is something that
I mean, I'm assuming this is, of course, it's a function of both what founders think is possible, and since we are talking about early stage risk, it's also a function of what venture capitalists
absolutely.
think is possible. In your own case, I think it was an accident, or it was like a pivot that allowed
We
you, like,
faced a
that
wall, we didn't have a choice.
if you had gone back in time and told investors that you were going to build a global seafood business, I doubt anyone
We
would have
wouldn't have
taken
got
that
the capital.
risk.
We wouldn't have got the capital.
With that benefit of hindsight today, so you're saying that more venture capitalists should be looking at this, at least considering it as an option.
So I think all of this started with the legacy that I'm chasing, right? I think that's what I feel, where I can add value. If we, in some form and shape, Captain Fresh, can become some good example of what can happen for an Indian founder trying to do something in a non-digital space in the market like a US and Europe. If we can become an example, I'll be very, very happy about what I have achieved. So that's the motivation today beyond money. I think that's where it started. So that's where I think that I feel that ecosystem would come around. It is about having right examples because I myself have seen these conversations evolve. People do now have that confidence that if there are 50%, 10% of your Fortune 500 are Indian CEOs, Indian founder owning up to a global problem statement is not a contrarian bet. It is a natural evolution because globally there are organizations which are looking at Indians to be their leaders, right? So I think it will evolve, which is what I think if next 10 years, 15 years, hopefully this is one segment which could get more and more attention and hopefully more and more risk capital and eventually more and more outcome.
For such a globe-trotting founder CEO and someone who's also running a fairly complex operations to global M&A kind of business, how do you run your typical week or uh, you know as a CEO? What does that process look like? Is it how calendarized is it? How structured is it? How are you thinking about dividing your time in a week?
Actually, I have a different way to run my business. I don't calendarize things. If you look at my calendar, it's empty. I pick large problem statements on a monthly basis. It could be one or two problem statements which are meaningful for my company. And I
By meaning could generate significant outcomes.
significant outcomes. It could be a fundraise, it could be a hire, it could be closing a transaction. It's like if you're driving the kind of things that we drive, which are transformational in nature, like each step is a big step. Founder energy is needed for that last 5%, otherwise it won't close, right? Things like that. So I pick one such thing every 1 or 2 months, and naturally this thing needs me to be at certain place, whether it's India, whether it's Europe, someplace, etc. So I spend intense 4 weeks on such problem statement, and then I go back to Amsterdam for 2 weeks, where that is more like a reflection time, where I calendarize things, where I do some of my review. I typically do 2 to 3 calls, 4 calls a day, get my typical reviews done. But that's also a time to unplug and see what are the next 1, 2, 3 problem statements to go after. Right. So that's how I have done. Maybe because I have a lot of seasoned CEOs to run the transaction part of the business, my job is to get the framework and flywheel right. And that's why this style works. It's almost, I say, it's a grazing versus hunting. I have solid people on the ground who are the best in class. Like, even if I want to do what they're doing, I will fail. They are so good. So I don't get into that. So they do their businesses. And my job is to ensure that they have enabled well, don't have friction. That's all my job is. But my job is getting the strategy right and all of that, which is like I mentioned, I take 4 weeks intense and then 2 weeks unplug. Then 4 weeks intense, 2 weeks unplug. So that's how I've been managing my workload.
It almost seems like one of those high intensity exercise routines, right? Where you go full blast for like a certain amount of time and then you walk easily and catch your breath and then you go full
Yeah.
blast, etc.
Because that full blast is needed given the nature of problem statements we take. Like if you are trying to close an large acquisition, there are obviously many things that we need. Or we are trying to close the DRHP crafting. Like there are so many last minute things. You need a founder energy, come and sit, be at the place of action, get it closed, right? So that's been my style. And I thought this kind of meshes in with how I was, right? I was a strategy consultant, I was an M&A banker, I've been a special projects guy. So it kind of meshes in with my style.
So when you say you're a special projects guy, the equivalent is like something needs to be done, figure out how it should be done, who is required, take it to completion,
Yes.
and then just
See
get
it
out
through.
of it.
See it through, get out of it. And also get to know when to get in actually. A
Hmm.
lot of times unnecessarily you get in, you actually don't add value. So knowing when to get in, when you know that yeah, this is the right time to step in. Like I remember we were crafting this DRHP, and uh, the last 2 weeks I was here to really just mobilize the team and just ensure that it's out. And once I realized that in the next 3 days it's out, I just went back to Amsterdam. So that's that's the style that I operate in.
All right. Speaking of the DRHP and the IPO, when is your IPO
So
due?
we filed for confidential IPO, but we had to withdraw it because we had two acquisitions that came in the way,
So that would materially change the
One is that
DRSPs.
would materially change, but the deal structure was such that there was an equity swap. I think where we missed the entire planning is that we did not consider this equity swap as part of pre-IPO. And pre-IPO, there is a cap of 20% of the proceeds that you would have declared in the document. So that essentially constrained our ability to close this acquisition.
So you're going to refile at some time.
So we withdrew. We will refile basis the original timelines, which is basis hopefully March 31st numbers. But this also gives us flexibility to close these two acquisitions, which will hopefully close in next few weeks.
You've obviously you're a fan of meeting people and customers frequently. What are some of the most interesting or counterintuitive things that you've learned from meeting or visiting customers in recent times?
Oh, I think the way customers look at seafood as a category, it's really educational for me. Like we talk about how do I transform seafood into a snacking category. More and more I meet the customers, I realize that there are some fundamental technologies that we need to crack. Basically, it's a lipid oxidation thing that we need to solve for because there are a lot of these omega 3, omega 6s. We have not really solved for how do I extend the shelf life of these products or the flavor tech. If you take a dairy, if you take all other categories which have been snack driven, this is a category which has a very strong odor, very strong taste profile. We haven't yet, industrialized technologies which can neutralize these flavors and ensure that this is broadly accessible. Or in fortification, in terms of how a dairy could extract a whey out of it, and the moment the whey was extracted, now in terms of fortification it is kind of democratized, right? Now you find it in chocolates, in everything that you see. So the whole limitations around fortification. So more and more we meet the customers, what we see in, especially in the European retail space, is that they see seafood as a very high quality nutrition dense product, but it's not easy to use. And there is a clear gap in terms of research development, number of dollars that has gone into this space, right? If we can plug this gap, there is a whole world out there that is like, it's actually the deep tech on the bio side, on the food side, that we need to crack. Now we have done distribution and brand, our tech. We need to now go into the product food.
Can you give me an example? This you've spoken about this so many times about seafood's final evolution as a snack. What might be some of the potential examples of seafood as
Let me give you an
the
example
equivalent
of
of a
something
Lay's
called
or chocolate
beef
or
jerkies, right?
hmm.
Right, that's now available in vending machine. Now you go to any gym, any high end gym, all of them have the vending machines.
Right.
Beef jerkins today occupy at least 15-20% of the space. Imagine that kind of consumption format today.
And it is associated very closely with health and fitness and working out and
Absolutely.
like
And
lean
beef
protein.
is 4 times the calories for the same amount of proteins as compared to seafood. And if seafood can go in that space, and if we have a product which has, like I said, the orderless,
Hmm.
taste profile solved for, fortification solved for, that really boosts the consumption of this category. That also increases the gross margin pool for this category, because today it is at best a commodity in whichever way you sell. Unless you are really handling the product in that easy to use format, you have a threshold in terms of what you can unlock as gross margin. That's what I mean by
So this snacking thing really comes down to, in your view, it sits at the apex of value addition
of
and
a food
price.
category.
So for example, the same potato, to use an example, if you're making it as a, let's
Lace.
say, a samosa versus a sabzi, or then finally at the Lays.
Yeah.
Now, without getting into the junk food or not, this thing, you're essentially
But now you
saying
have
that
protein lace, right? Let's say
that's right, that's
protein
right.
embedded lace.
Right.
Yeah.
It's the ability to charge the highest premium and to obviously package it and sell it with a brand attached to it.
Absolutely. So that comes down to this thing that, look, if a Nestle plus Danone has a 10% marketing budget, which is $5 billion, which is doing end consumer work and transforming a category which is easy to use. Seafood as a category, I think the entire industry put together, we wouldn't cross $2-3 billion in terms of marketing budget. Now you compound this over 20-30 year period.
I'm again assuming that this goes back to that fragmented point where everybody is like, it's like sometimes a category lead, somebody, the first person to spend money on marketing is effectively branding the category, and nobody wants to do that in some senses, because if it's fragmented, why am I spending money building brand awareness for the category itself? So it's like again
Absolutely.
another chicken
It's
and egg.
another chicken and egg issue. Correct.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Very interesting. You have an 8-year-old, what, son, daughter?
Son.
Tell us about your son's view of the world and how you see that as a father.
Actually, it's an interesting journey that I've had with my son, because most of his formative years I was busy.
Have coincided with Captain
Yeah,
Fresh. Yeah.
it's almost like real coincidence, and it's a very interesting thing. My son, in his own way, founded a company called Blackfish, and he thought his way of getting my attention is to discuss about that company with me. And then he would come to my office and observe a lot of things around the boardroom and some smaller things. And he would go back to his house and have some similar setup. At some point, I felt that, is he doing this because I'm not able to really give my attention to him? And if he feels that he has to be speaking similar to
Yeah.
that. And there are a lot of these tough conversations now that he's become big. He actually says that Captain Fresh is my bigger brother, and you actually have a lot more love for Captain Fresh versus me, right? So that's been something like, you fight with that thought, and that was the biggest driver for me to move to Amsterdam. Like I said, I spent a lot of time in 23, 24 in the flight. My family was back then in India, and then I moved them to Amsterdam, hoping that I can spend more weekends with my son.
Because being in Europe allows you to have
Allows me
that as
to,
a base and, like,
yes,
not
yeah,
keep
a
traveling
lot of
back to
dead
India.
travel I could cut. In fact, it's cut. It's like it's come down 50% if you look at my 25 travel. And yeah, I managed to spend a few more weekends with him. Hopefully, build a few more memories with him over weekends. So it's a very interesting journey as a founder and as a father. Sometimes you're not happy about some of the choices that you make. It makes you emotional, but no, that's the journey. That's the choice that you make. Yeah.
Interesting. What do weekends look like for you? Are there weekends for you?
Yes, weekends are there. Generally now, half of the weekend I try and spend with my son, go to a park, or he's into coding, sit with him, stuff like that. Other half is about my fitness. I have this thing of running a 10K, and then uh, doing a strength training, and then doing some sauna and some ice bath. It's like a 4 hour thing which really resets me, especially the sauna and ice bath. It's a great reset for me.
So this is one more of those things that is like a very intense, like you do it and then you get out and then you're
Yeah,
like,
yeah, I really feel recharged when I do a 10K, a strength training. This thing, it's like a blast.
since when have you been running?
So I used to be 95 kgs at around 40% body fat, and I've transformed
Wow.
myself.
I mean, I must say, since listeners can't, like, see you, because but you are very fit right now. You don't look anything like,
Yeah, now I am
yeah.
14%, and I lost around 25 kgs. And yeah, done that with just the fat loss, no muscle loss. And it's happened in the last 2 years. And yeah, that's also part of that realization that what can really make this long term, where I can settle down, where I
Your
can,
own health and
my own health,
wellness being.
yeah, body being the tool. And I think it has also really calmed myself down and really start thinking a lot more long term. In
Do you meditate?
I don't meditate, but I do walk a lot, and I do read a lot. I read a lot of history books and economics, geography books. That is my form of calming myself down and meditation. I have not yet gone into this meditation piece, but of course, sometimes I,
No, I think all of like, I mean, I cannot bring myself to do it as well. I've tried it as well. But I think all people meditate in their own
Way.
way. I
Yeah, there's
mean,
a
like,
process
right.
to it. So for me, that process is every day at least 1 to 2 hours I walk, and I try to take my time out in terms of reading something when I'm walking, at least listening to
Which is
something,
listening to. Okay.
listening to. That really helps me. And if I'm in Europe, it is a great, I think I have a golden hour because after 7 o'clock, India is shut. And yes, US is active all the way till 10:30, but second half of US is also not very active because most of my US teams start very early at like 6:37 a.m. they start.
So,
So
what are your working hours in Amsterdam like when you're in Amsterdam?
I wake up at 7, India is buzzing, and by around 12:31, the high intensity activity in India is kind of slowing down. So that's when I try and hit the gym, and then food, etc., and then US. And by I think by 6, 7 o'clock, it's quiet, generally quiet all around the world. And then that's when I take a walk and go out and have my 2 hours of this thing, listening to audiobook, etc. So yes,
Do you have any book recommendations that you've read in recent times? Or do you have any books that you gift to people frequently because you love them so much or you recommend them so much?
of course, this recommendation keeps changing, but I think the last 1 month of the books that I've read, three books that have stood out for me. One is Peak Humans. I've always seen, like, if you look at the style of Captain Fresh, I've been extremely open. And I believe that it's about getting the people in, it's about learning from outsiders. And Peak Human is about these last seven empires. And what I saw strikingly similar is the empires at their peak were very open. Like, there is this statement which said, openness was the greatest weapon of the Roman Empire. They were like a sponge. They would go to so many other different parts of the world and really, really learn and make themselves enriched. Even a Muslim empire was so forward looking at that time. So, Peak Human is something that I would really recommend. Second, that I've read in the last quarter or so, is something called Tibetan Book on uh, Living and Death. And I have been pondering around impermanence for a while. And this is one book which really put a lot of things in perspective. And also the power when you start believing in impermanence, actually a perspective is very, very different. And this recommendation of this book came from another book called Comfort Crisis. In that book, there is this thing that mentions that Bhutan is the happiest place while it does not own material, because the kids in Bhutan in their school are asked to think about death for 5 minutes every day. And that kind of resets their perspective and ensures that they optimize for happiness and not really worried about the daily small stuff. Right. So that gave me this indication of really learning about this impermanence, death, and this Tibetan book was really good. I think on the macro side, the history has been interesting. The only reason I say this is, you look
Sorry, the
around,
history of?
history has begun. You look around, it is very easy to believe that US empire is on a decline, and it matters to me because we have such a large exposure to US and currency and all that. So getting your own sense of where things are heading is important. This is possibly the only book that I read in the recent past which has a contrarian view, which says that US has figured out a way to set a narrative and to convince the world around that narrative. So this whole belief that US is on a decline is has been around every 30, 40 years. So it's not something that you can extrapolate. That's a very interesting view. So that's something that, yeah. So yeah, it varies. So it keeps changing. So it's just the last 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks that I've been.
But do you read physical books or do you read on the Kindle?
When I'm traveling, I read physical books, or I listen to audiobooks, especially when
Got it.
I'm walking around.
What is your flight, since you spend so much time on flights? What's your flight routine like?
Flight routine, yeah, I think I try and cut the time before flight, after flight. The other thing that I do is I don't check in the luggage. I've never checked in the luggage. In fact, mostly I go around with this backpack from US to Europe to every other place. That keeps me very light and efficient. And the other thing is, yeah, I think I try and take one book for one trip and try and cover that. And then I have 3 or 4 podcasts that I do. And on top of this, I'll have 1 or 2, those nagging problems that is bothering me. I'll have them also on the side
To reflect.
to reflect on, to unplug, and to see, what the chess moves look like, what are the different scenarios, what are the different dominoes, what are the implication of the decisions that you take, things like that, right? Yeah. So that's actually, I love that space, right? I love solitude. I love time with myself. I love this space when I have a book, this thing, no internet, on your flight. All you're hearing is that buzzing of engines.
No internet is a choice on flights these days.
Yeah, actually, you're right. Yeah.
But it's a good choice to make, actually.
Yeah.
Any new things that you've tried recently? Habits, fads, hobbies? Anything you've geeked out over?
No, I think it's just anything around fitness is something that now I'm super interested in. So if you ask me what I've geeked out is essentially all these metrics around VO2 max and this and that and all of that I've been tracking
All right.
and seeing,
I
learning
noticed
from.
you're not an Apple. Oh, you're
I am
a
an ultra human.
ultra human.
Ultra human. In fact, I used to use Aura. I just switched to this one. Actually, done a great job on this. Yeah.
Very interesting. Last couple of questions. On a scale of 1 to 10, how happy are you?
I was less happy. I think I'm more happy now. That's an easy question to answer. But I don't know what the ultimate happiness looks like.
You
But
still answer the question. On a scale of 1 to 10,
let's say 7.
why were you not happy earlier?
It's just
What
that,
was it earlier?
like I said, chasing something material.
When was that? How long ago was that?
I don't know, maybe, when we were 3 years earlier, 4 years
Got it.
earlier, right? Now, yes, I think I have a little bit more nuanced thing to go after, but I'm sure happiness is a function of expectations. Keep lowering your expectation, but also ensuring that you're
I'm
competitive.
seeing a lot of common threads: impermanence, death, lowering expectations, self reflections, ability to spend time with myself, solitude, legacy. Like, if I'm just drawing a line, like they're all sort of now connecting. So I feel like I know you much better at the end of these 2 hours. Thank you so much, Utham. Been such a wonderful conversation.
Thanks so much, Rohin. I have learned so much about myself talking to you.
Thank you.
Thank
It's been a great conversation, Utham.
Thank
Really
you.
enjoyed it. If you've been a long-time listener to this podcast and are glad we're back, do tell the world by sharing this episode with everyone you think will find it valuable. Produced by Udantika Kashyap and mixed and mastered by the wonderful Rajiv CN, our resident sound engineer. This is me, Rohin Dharmakumar, signing off. We'll be back soon with another episode.